When we're talking about an anti-inflammatory diet, it's very hard to ignore one of the real superfoods here, which is oysters. Shellfish, mussels, mollusks tend to be extremely high in vitamin B, B12 specifically, which is an essential nutrient for good general health and kind of, if you like, your main metabolism, converting food into energy, which is obviously a very important process. Also, they're packed with vitamin C, and they're probably easily the highest food of zinc. So from an immune system point of view, and don't forget, a lot of autoimmune issues are diseases are, they're immune related. So it's autoimmune. So getting the right nutrient balance that your body can use its immune system correctly is essential. Zinc and vitamin C's and so on are very, very important. But this humble little shellfish, again, it's packed with the omega-3 fatty acids. Very, very high levels of them. Very high in protein, very low in general calories and so on. And they're really a true superfood. Even from a vegetarian point of view, ethically, there's no central nervous system per se, so they're not much more up from, although they're an animal, they're on the greater scheme of things, they're not much different to a plant. They grow, their kind of actions are more plant-like almost. So ethically, they're probably also the most sustainable form of animal protein that you can actually consume. Environmentally, the environmental impact of harvesting oysters is negligible, and just making sure that they're coming from good quality water, good reliable producers and so on, that they're coming from areas that are well tested and but oysters are, if at all possible, it's good to get these into your diet. They have a reputation as being expensive. They're actually not that expensive as they used to be, but the big issue here is opening them. Now, you don't have to eat oysters raw, for one thing. They cook beautifully, and what I'm going to do here is a little steamed dish. And the reason, again, I'm using steaming is because I'm trying to protect those fatty acids. And another thing as well is when I steam them, the abductor muscle in the oyster is going to loosen up, and they become very easy to open. They'll basically open themselves. So this is a good way of actually cooking the oysters. I'm going to use a little bit of seaweed. You don't have to use the seaweed, but I just find it gives a little bit of flavor, but more so it's good for presentation, and the oysters are held upright very easily. But steaming the oysters like this is a great way of bringing them into your diet without having to worry about a raw oyster per se, and they really are tasty. I'm going to do that with a little Japanese sauce. What I've got here is a generous teaspoon of honey. Just to make a very quick sauce, I'm going to put about 2 tablespoons of rice wine vinegar into that. I haven't measured it, but it's about 2 tablespoons. Just mix that around in the honey first, just to mix the two of them together. I'm going to put a generous dash of Japanese soy sauce into this, just to break it down, just to melt in the honey. If your honey isn't melting into the sauce very nicely, you could just warm it very, very lightly, just to put a bit of warmth into it, just to allow it to heat through. And finally, what I'm going to use is some of this nice pickled ginger. I'm going to use a generous couple of teaspoons of that. And again, this sauce would last for a few weeks almost. It's only salt and vinegar basically, so it'll last. As a little accompaniment, you can make this in advance. It goes great with all sorts of fish and as a little dip. But that's it. Just a little kind of a ginger ponzo kind of sauce, just to accompany my steamed oysters. And I just make that very, very quickly. There's no point in delving on that too long. It's just a very, very simple little dip. So next up, how to steam your oysters. Now, to steam my oysters, very, very simple. Heat up a pan. You must have a nice tight fitting lid on your pan. Get it nice and hot. And if you don't have to use the seaweed, but I find it's very convenient. Plus it presents lovely. Pop your seaweed into the pan. And then oysters. As you can see, they're still closed. And the whole idea of this is you're preserving all of the goodness of the oyster by steaming, but it also makes it very easy and very safe as well to open the oyster. The oysters will basically open themselves. So I just rest them nice onto the seaweed and then add a little bit of water onto it. About a cup of water, depending how big your pan is. Keep it on a very, very high heat. And then get the lid on it. We'll let those cook until the oysters start to open up. Now it's going to vary depending on the power of your own cooker. So it might take 3 to 4 minutes, might take a little bit longer. But basically we're cooking this until the oysters just start to open themselves naturally. Now I haven't cooked this for about 4.5 minutes. Again, it's going to depend very much on your own cooker and the amount of power and the size of the oysters and so on. But when the oysters kind of feel good and hot to the touch, most times that means they're cooked through. So there we have it. Our oysters nicely cooked through for me. And then we're going to just to serve this very, very simply. Just going to turn them off. They'll hold their heat quite nicely there. Just going to get myself a little plate. And first of all, I'm going to take that seaweed and pop it on the plate. Some people, it's not inedible this, but this particular bladder wrack species you wouldn't generally eat, although I have seen people attempt it. So let's get our seaweed there, and it's just great for holding the oysters upright. Then our little ginger sauce that we made earlier, I'm just going to pop on the plate, and then I'm just going to take my oysters. I'm just going to put these aside here for a second, and you'll find that the oysters will be quite easy to cook, to open now at this stage. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a cloth. I'll pop the oyster in the cloth, very thick, and then I have an oyster knife, but if you don't, they generally open quite easily anyhow. But what you're looking for is to get this little joint here, and even in the pan, like as you can see, there won't be any pressure required. If you just put it down there, because these oysters are cooked now at this stage, the shell just will pop open there very easily. And then I'm just going to, just here, there's a muscle called the abductor muscle, and we want to just cut that. And as you can see, now do hold the oyster upright because you do want that lovely juice as well. So as you can see, they're just opening, they're lovely and hot. And this isn't like normal shucking an oyster. As you can see, they're nicely cooked through. And it's only a case of just popping those lids off it. If you lose a little bit of that juice, don't worry. That's a little bit of the seawater that they're harvested from. But as you can see, they come off very, very easily. Just try go for that little muscle at the edge. Just take your time with them. Don't forget, there's nothing really holding these closed at the moment, so it's only a case of working the shell. But do, when you're using your knife, don't point your knife, don't hold the oyster like this and start going, because then the knife can slip and go into your hand. Any kind of knife. If you notice the way I'm doing it, I'm putting down the oyster, and my knife is never, ever, ever pointing towards my hand. So if it does slip, it's only going to slip onto the board. And don't rush it. You're not trying to go fast or anything like that. Just take your time with these guys. Beautiful little oysters there. Lovely steamed. All the goodness still packed into these oysters. And then when you're serving, we have our lovely little seaweed. Now a good idea is, if you don't have seaweed and you want to hold them upright, I find that a good idea is just take the shell here that they were from, and they tend to balance quite well on those shells as well. So The but if you have the seaweed, and then it's just a case of just a little piece of ginger onto that, little piece of the sauce, and serve away. Very, very simple little dish. Our little steamed oysters, which are absolutely packed with zinc, vitamin B, absolutely everything you need. Beautiful, very, very simple little dish.